The helicopter blades cut through the darkness like a promise of violence. 3:47 in the morning, the kind of hour when most of America slept safe in their beds, dreaming dreams they'd forget by breakfast. But at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, in the mountains of North Carolina, sleep was a luxury nobody could afford. Captain Kira Ashford stepped onto the tarmac, her boots hitting concrete with a sound that felt too loud in the pre-dawn stillness. 28 years old, 5'6", hair the color of wheat fields pulled into a regulation bun so tight it made her temples ache. She carried a single duffel bag over her left shoulder and a rifle case in her right hand. The case was custom, carbon fiber, built to protect a weapon that cost more than most people earned in a year. The crew chief watched her walk away from the bird, his face a mixture of confusion and something that might have been pity. He'd flown a lot of cargo into Fort Bragg over the years. Weapons, ammunition, men who looked like they could kill you 17 different ways before you hit the ground. But a woman? Alone? At this hour? With orders sealed tighter than a drum? That was new. Kira didn't look back. She'd learned a long time ago that looking back was how you got killed. Forward. Always forward. Even when forward led you straight into hell. The operations center loomed ahead, a squat building that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated beauty and loved function. Light spilled from the windows. Inside, she could see figures moving, men in tactical gear, men who had no idea she was coming, men who were about to have a very bad morning. She pushed through the door. 8 faces turned toward her. 8 pairs of eyes that went from curious to hostile in the space between heartbeats. The room smelled like coffee and gun oil, and the particular brand of testosterone that came from men who'd spent their entire adult lives learning how to kill people in interesting ways. Commander Victor Blackwell stood at the center of the room, 45 years old, shoulders like a linebacker, jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite by an artist who specialized in intimidation. He held a folder in his hands, and even from across the room, Kira could see the black bars redacting most of the text. Classified, top secret, need to know, and apparently nobody in this room needed to know. "You're Ashford," Blackwell said, not a question, an accusation. "Yes, sir." "You're 28 years old." "Yes, sir." "You understand this is an active operational team preparing for a high-value target mission?" "That's why I'm here, sir." The man to Blackwell's left laughed. Senior Chief Nathan Garrett, 38 years old. The kind of weather that came from 2 decades of doing things that would give normal people nightmares. His eyes were the color of winter sky, and right now they looked at Kira like she was something that had crawled out from under a rock. "This is precious," Garrett said. His voice carried the weight of a man who'd forgotten more about combat than most people would ever learn. "Absolutely precious. Did someone lose a bet? Is this a morale thing? Because I've got to say, Commander, sending us a babysitting job really boosts team spirit." Kira turned to face him. Her expression didn't change, didn't flicker. She'd been looked at this way before, by men who thought they knew what she was, by men who thought they knew what she could do, by men who were always, always wrong. "I'm not a babysitting job, Senior Chief." "No? Then what are you?" "Someone who's going to save your life before this week is over." The silence that followed was absolute. Garrett's smile faded like frost in sunlight. His eyes hardened into something that would have made a weaker person take a step back. "Little girl, I've been doing this job since before you were born. I've forgotten more about combat than you'll ever learn. So maybe show some respect before you start making promises you can't keep." "Respect is earned," Kira said quietly. "So is doubt. You haven't earned either from me yet." Blackwell stepped between them before Garrett could respond. "Enough. Ashford, find quarters. Stay out of the way. We'll figure out what to do with you in the morning." "Sir, my orders authorize me for—" "I don't care what your orders authorize. My team, my rules. Dismissed." Kira held his gaze for a long moment. 3 years. 3 years since she'd worn the uniform. 3 years since she'd stood in a room full of men who looked at her like she was the enemy. She'd hoped it would be different this time. She'd hoped that maybe, just maybe, the world had changed enough that a woman with her skills could walk into a room without having to prove she deserved to breathe the same air. She'd been wrong. She nodded once, turned, and walked out. Behind her, she heard Garrett mutter, "Someone needs to send that kid home before she gets herself killed." The door closed. The night swallowed the words. And Kira Ashford stood alone in the darkness, her hands trembling with a rage she couldn't afford to show. Sergeant Dylan Brennan found her an hour later, sitting outside the armory on a bench that had seen better decades. She was cleaning a rifle. Not just any rifle, an Mk13 Mod 7, 7.62 NATO, effective range out to 1,200 meters in the right hands, custom stock, custom barrel, custom everything. The kind of weapon that made serious people ask serious questions. Brennan stopped 3 feet away, studying the rifle with the eye of someone who understood what he was seeing. "That's not standard issue," he said. Kira didn't look up. Her hands moved with practiced precision, breaking down the weapon and reassembling it without conscious thought. "No, that's custom work, high-end custom work. Someone spent serious money on that rifle." "My father." Brennan moved closer. He was 29 years old, lean, the kind of face that looked like it smiled easily, though right now it was serious. "Your father gave you a $50,000 sniper rifle?" "He gave me a lot of things. Shooting was just one of them." Brennan sat down across from her. Unlike the others, his eyes held curiosity rather than contempt. "You're not what they think you are you?" Kira finally looked at him, really looked at him, saw the intelligence behind the easy manner, saw the way his eyes tracked movement at the edges of his peripheral vision even while they talked, saw the way he breathed, slow, controlled, deliberate. "What do they think I am?" "A kid, someone's daughter who pulled strings to play soldier, a liability waiting to happen." "And what do you think?" Brennan studied her for a long moment. The way she held the rifle, the way her eyes never quite stopped scanning their surroundings, the way she breathed, like someone who'd learned a long time ago that the difference between life and death could be measured in the space between heartbeats. "I think you're something they've never seen before," he said, "and that scares them more than they'll admit." The next morning came too fast and not fast enough. Kira stood in the operations center again. This time, the entire base seemed to have found a reason to be nearby. Word traveled fast in places like this. Word about the woman who'd shown up in the middle of the night with orders nobody could read and a rifle nobody could afford. Senior Chief Garrett stood at the front of the room. If possible, he looked even more hostile than he had 6 hours ago. "Range qualification," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If the technical specialist is going to be on my base, she needs to prove she can at least hold a weapon without shooting herself." Kira set down her coffee. "Fine," Garrett grinned. "That's it? No protests? No excuses?" "Why would I protest?" She stood. "I've been waiting for someone to give me permission to shoot." 40 minutes later, most of the base had gathered at the firing range. In the military, entertainment was where you found it. And the prospect of watching a woman embarrass herself in front of the best shooters in the United States military, that was entertainment gold. Garrett handed her a standard M4 carbine. "Let's start simple. Targets at 200 meters, 3 rounds. Try not to miss completely." Kira looked at the weapon, then back at Garrett. "Permission to use my own equipment, Senior Chief." "Your own?" He laughed. "Sure, sweetheart. Whatever makes you feel comfortable." She walked to her case, opened it, withdrew the Mk13 that Brennan had admired the night before. The crowd murmured. Rifles like that didn't just appear. They were built, customized, loved. They were extensions of the people who carried them. Garrett's smile flickered. Kira set up on the firing line. The first target was at 500 meters. Standard qualification distance for designated marksmen, beyond what most soldiers could hit consistently with iron sights, beyond what most people could hit at all. She chambered around. The sound was crisp, clean, final. 3 shots, 500 meters. When the spotter looked through his scope, he went very still. Then he turned around, his face pale. 3 rounds, he said. Same hole. I can't tell them apart without walking down there. The murmur grew louder. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. The woman was supposed to struggle, to fail, to prove that she didn't belong here. That was the script. That was the story everyone had written in their heads before she'd fired the first round. 700, Garrett said. His voice had lost its mocking edge. Now it was flat, professional. The voice of a man who just realized he might have made a mistake. Kira adjusted her scope. 3 more rounds, 700 meters, same ragged hole. The range went quiet. The kind of quiet that came when something impossible was happening and nobody quite knew how to process it. 900, same result. 1,100 meters. Garrett's voice was barely above a whisper now. Light crosswind, 15 miles per hour from the northeast. Kira adjusted for wind, for elevation, for the curve of the earth itself. 1,100 meters wasn't a shot. It was a mathematical equation with 1,000 variables. Temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, the rotation of the planet beneath your feet. She fired 3 times. The spotter looked for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice cracked. 3 rounds, same hole. I can't even see the individual impacts. Garrett stared at the distant target. 1,100 meters in light crosswind with a rifle she just picked up. 3 rounds that could be covered by a quarter. 3 rounds that said everything about who this woman was and nothing about who anyone had thought she would be. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. Kira began breaking down her rifle. Her hands moved with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd performed this ritual 10,000 times. "Someone who doesn't miss, Senior Chief." She looked at him. Her pale eyes held a stillness that made grown men uncomfortable. Someone who never misses. That night, Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Sinclair sat in the intelligence office, staring at a computer screen that refused to give her answers. She was 35 years old, sharp, the kind of intelligence officer who could see patterns where other people saw noise. And right now, every instinct she had was screaming that something was wrong. She'd been running Kira Ashford's name through every database she had access to. Most of it came back redacted, black bars covering everything except basic biographical data. No training records, no unit assignments, no explanation for how a 28-year-old woman could shoot like a special operations veteran with decades of experience. But there was one note, one small annotation buried in the classification codes. JSOC authorization required. Ashford Protocol. Sinclair had never heard of an Ashford Protocol. She'd never seen clearance requirements this strict for someone so young. Whatever Kira Ashford really was, someone very powerful wanted it kept secret. She pulled up the woman's family records. Father, Admiral James Ashford. Occupation, military rank, classified. That shouldn't be possible. Ranks weren't classified unless the rank was high enough that knowing it would reveal too much. Sinclair's hands went cold. She was still staring at the screen when she heard the door open behind her. She didn't turn around, didn't need to. She could feel the presence. The weight of someone who moved like smoke and struck like lightning. "You've been researching me," Kira said. Sinclair finally turned. The woman stood in the doorway, backlit by the corridor lights. She looked smaller than she had on the range, more vulnerable. But her eyes were the eyes of someone who'd seen things that normal people only had nightmares about. "Someone has to know who you really are," Sinclair said. "Why?" "Because in 48 hours, my people are going into hostile territory, and I need to know if you're an asset or a liability." Kira moved closer. In the dim light of the monitors, her face looked older than 28, older than it had any right to be. What did you find? Nothing. Everything's classified. Locked behind walls I don't have clearance to breach. Sinclair leaned forward. But I know how to read between the lines. Your father isn't just military. He's someone important. Someone who trained you personally. Someone who gave you skills that shouldn't exist in someone your age. Does it matter who he is? It might matter why you're here, Sinclair stood. Why are you here, Kira? Really? This isn't a training exercise. This isn't some field trip to pad your resume. Men are going to die on this mission. Maybe a lot of men. Why would anyone send a 28-year-old into that? Kira was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because someone is going to betray you. Someone you trust. And I'm here to stop them. The mission briefing happened at 1400 hours the next day. The operations center had never felt smaller. 8 operators crowded around a table covered in satellite imagery and tactical displays. Blackwell stood at the front, a laser pointer in his hand, his face grim. Target is Abdul Karim, he said. The screen behind him showed a photograph. A man in his 40s. Hard eyes. The kind of face that had seen too much and given back worse. He's responsible for 17 attacks on coalition forces in Afghanistan between 2010 and 2012. Intelligence confirms he's meeting with arms dealers tomorrow night at a compound near the Arizona-Mexico border. The satellite image shifted. A compound in the desert, adobe walls, guard towers, the kind of place that said money and paranoia in equal measure. We insert by vehicle, Blackwell continued. Approach on foot, eliminate the target, extract. Mission window is 6 hours from breach to wheels up. Garrett raised his hand. What about the intelligence source? How reliable is this? Source is classified, but command considers it solid. We've been tracking Karim's movements for 3 months. This is the best opportunity we're going to get. Kira stood near the back of the room. She'd been studying the intelligence package since Sinclair had slipped her a copy that morning, and everything about it bothered her. The information was too clean, too perfect, like someone had constructed it specifically for them to find. Sir, she said. Every head turned. Blackwell's jaw tightened. Ashford, this is a command briefing. I understand, sir, but I have concerns about the intelligence. Garrett snorted. Of course you do. The technical specialist has concerns about intelligence gathered by professionals with decades of experience. Kira ignored him. Her eyes stayed locked on Blackwell. The compound layout, the guard rotations, the timing of the meeting. It's too convenient. It reads like someone constructed it specifically for us to find. And you know this how? Blackwell demanded. Because I've seen this pattern before. In training simulations designed to identify ambush scenarios. She moved to the table, pointing at the satellite image. Look at the approach routes. Every one of them funnels into a natural kill box. The guard positions aren't arranged for security, they're arranged for overlapping fields of fire against an attacking force. The room erupted, operators shouting over each other, some defending the intelligence, others demanding to know how a woman who hadn't been in combat in 3 years thought she knew better than their analysts. Blackwell raised his hand. The silence was immediate. When he spoke, his voice was ice. Ashford, you're dismissed from this briefing and from this mission. You will remain on base tomorrow night. That's an order. Sir, that's an order. Kira looked around the room. At the men who would be walking into that compound. At Brennan, whose face showed he believed her. At Garrett, whose contempt had only deepened. At Blackwell, whose pride wouldn't let him admit that maybe, just maybe, the woman everyone wanted to dismiss might be right. I hope I'm wrong, she said quietly. For all your sakes, I hope I'm wrong. She walked out. Behind her, Blackwell turned back to his team. The mission proceeds as planned. We launch at 2200 hours tomorrow. Brennan found her at the vehicle depot an hour before mission launch. She was staring at a line of Humvees like they held answers to questions she didn't want to ask. "You really believe it's a trap?" he asked. "I know it is." "How?" "Because I've spent my entire life being trained to recognize them." Kira turned to face him. "My father, he's not just military, Dylan. He designed half the tactical doctrine that special operations uses today. He's been preparing me for moments exactly like this since I was 5 years old." Brennan was quiet. Then, "Why would someone set up an ambush?" "That's what I don't know yet. But someone with access to classified intelligence fed you that information. Someone who wants this team dead. If you're right and they walk into an ambush tomorrow night," he didn't finish, didn't need to. They both knew what happened to soldiers who walked into carefully prepared kill boxes. Casualties weren't just probable, they were guaranteed. "I have to go," Kira said. "Blackwell ordered you to stay." "I know. You'll be court-martialed." "I know that too." She met his eyes. "But when everything goes wrong tomorrow night, I need you to remember this conversation. Because I'm going to do something that will probably end my career. And I need at least one person to understand why." That night, Kira wrote a letter. She didn't know if anyone would ever read it, but she needed to put the words down. Needed to make them real. "Colonel Rutherford, tomorrow something bad is going to happen. I've tried to warn them, but they won't listen. They see a woman. They see someone who doesn't belong. They can't see past their own assumptions to recognize the truth. You always told me that the hardest part of being exceptional isn't the training or the sacrifice. It's being underestimated by everyone around you. It's knowing you can help and being told to stand down. I'm not going to stand down. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm going to do what you trained me to do. I'm going to save them, even if they don't want to be saved. Respectfully, Kira." She sealed the letter and placed it on her desk. Then she checked her rifle one final time, made sure her pack was ready, and lay down to wait for the moment when everything would change. The helicopters lifted off at 2200 hours exactly. Kira watched from the edge of the landing pad as the birds disappeared into the darkness, carrying 8 men toward what she knew was waiting for them. Garrett's words from the briefing echoed in her mind. The mission proceeds as planned. She waited until the sound of rotors faded completely. Then she walked to the motor pool. The night guard was a young corporal named Liam Thatcher, fresh-faced, probably 23, the kind of kid who still thought the military was about honor and glory and serving your country. He looked up from his post as she approached. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Kira reached into her pocket and withdrew something she'd never shown anyone before. A credential, red border, gold seal. The kind of authorization that made people who saw it go very pale, very fast. Thatcher stared at the name, at the clearance level that shouldn't exist for someone her age, at the signature at the bottom that carried the weight of 4 stars and 30 years of service. "I need a vehicle," she said, "fast and quiet, and I need you to forget I was ever here." Thatcher swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am, whatever you need." The road north was treacherous in darkness. Kira drove without lights, using night vision goggles that turned the world into shades of green and gray. The desert stretched out on both sides like an ocean of stone and sand. Beautiful, deadly, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out beneath its vast sky. 40 kilometers to the target compound, 90 minutes if she pushed hard, if the roads held, if nothing went wrong. Her radio crackled, the team's frequency. She'd memorized it during the briefing, even though she wasn't supposed to have access. Blackwell's voice. "Viper team approaching objective. All elements report ready." The responses came one by one. Garrett, Brennan, the others, all confirming, all moving into position, all walking into a trap that would kill them if she didn't reach them in time. Kira pressed the accelerator harder. The Humvee roared through the night like a promise of salvation or a harbinger of doom. She didn't know which. Didn't matter. She was coming. That was enough. Behind her, Fort Bragg faded into the distance. Ahead, the mountains rose like jagged teeth against the stars. And somewhere between them, 8 men were about to learn that sometimes the people you dismiss are the only ones who can save you. The compound sat in the desert like a wound in the earth. Adobe walls the color of dried blood. Guard towers that watched the approaches with the cold patience of predators. Somewhere inside those walls, Abdul Karim was waiting. Or so the intelligence said. The intelligence that Kira knew was a lie. 2:15 in the morning, the air had that particular desert cold that came after midnight, when the land gave back all the heat it had stolen from the sun. Kira was still 12 kilometers out, pushing the Humvee as hard as the terrain would allow. The engine roared. The suspension screamed. None of it mattered. She was still too far, still too slow. The radio crackled. Blackwell's voice came through first. Calm, professional. The voice of a man who'd done this 100 times before. Viper team in position, beginning approach to outer perimeter. Then silence. The kind of silence that came before thunder. Kira counted seconds in her head. 30, 40, 50. The breach should have happened by now. The team should be reporting entry, should be moving through the compound in that smooth, deadly ballet that special operations teams practiced until it became muscle memory. 60 seconds. 70. The radio exploded. Contact! Contact! We're taking fire from all directions. Not Blackwell's voice. Someone younger. Panicked. The kind of panic that came when training met reality and reality won. Multiple hostiles. East wall. West wall. They're everywhere. Gunfire. Explosive. Continuous. The sound of a carefully planned ambush unfolding exactly the way someone had designed it. Kira's hands tightened on the wheel. She'd been right. God help her, she'd been right. Viper 6, this is Viper 2. Garrett's voice now, strained. We're pinned down in the courtyard. This isn't random resistance. This is a goddamn kill box. More gunfire. Screaming. The wet sound of bullets hitting flesh. Man down. Hayes is hit. Shoulder wound. He's still mobile, but we need to fall back. Fall back where? Someone shouting. They've got every exit covered. Kira pressed harder on the accelerator. 10 kilometers. The Humvee bounced over rocks that would have shattered axles on a civilian vehicle. She didn't care, didn't slow down. 8 men were dying, and she was still too far away to help them. Blackwell's voice cut through the chaos. Command voice. The voice of a man who'd trained his entire life to stay calm when the world was ending. All elements, this is Viper 6. Consolidate position in the northeast corner. Overlapping fields of fire. We hold until air support arrives. Negative on air support, a new voice. Command center, probably Sinclair. SAM position confirmed on the eastern ridge. Birds can't get close until it's neutralized. The eastern ridge. Kira's mind calculated automatically. 1,200 meters from the compound, maybe 1,300. Perfect position for a surface-to-air missile launcher. Perfect position to keep rescue helicopters at bay while the men on the ground died slowly. How long until it's neutralized? Blackwell's voice held an edge now. The first crack in the professional calm. Working on it, Viper 6. Stand by. We don't have time to stand by. Viper 2 is bleeding out. Garrett. Senior Chief Nathan Garrett. The man who'd mocked her. Who'd called her a babysitting job. Who'd looked at her like she was something that needed to be sent home before she got hurt. His voice came through the radio now. Weaker. Wet. The sound of a man whose blood was leaving his body faster than his heart could replace it. Femoral artery, Garrett said. His words were slurred. Applied tourniquet. Losing a lot of blood. Maybe an hour, maybe less. Stay with me, Senior Chief. Blackwell's voice cracked for the first time. That's an order. You don't have permission to die. Garrett's response was barely audible. Tell that kid I was wrong about her. Tell her yourself. You're going to make it. Kira was 8 kilometers out now. The ridge was coming into view. Not the eastern ridge where the SAM was positioned, a parallel ridge to the south, lower, harder to reach, but with a sight line to the SAM position that just might work. She grabbed the radio, keyed the frequency she wasn't supposed to have access to. Viper 6, this is Ghost. I have eyes on the SAM position, 1,400 meters. I can take the shot. Silence. Complete. Absolute. The kind of silence that came when something impossible had just been said and nobody's brain had caught up yet. Then Blackwell's voice. Disbelief and fury mixed together. Ashford, what the hell are you doing out here? 1,400 meters, Commander. Night conditions. Crosswind. I can make this shot. That's impossible. Nobody can. I can. Her voice was calm, certain. The voice of someone who'd made impossible shots before and would make them again. Give me permission to fire. Another silence. Longer this time. She could imagine Blackwell processing what he was hearing. The woman he'd dismissed, the technical specialist he'd ordered to stay on base. Somehow on a ridge above the battlefield, offering to take a shot that his best snipers couldn't make. If you miss, Blackwell said quietly, they'll see your muzzle flash. They'll know exactly where you are. I know. You'll be hunted, alone, with no support. I know. Ashford, Blackwell's voice dropped. Why are you doing this? Kira looked at the ridge ahead, at the distance she'd have to climb, at the shot she'd have to make. Because you didn't listen when I told you it was a trap. Because Garrett is dying. Because Brennan has a daughter who needs her father to come home. She paused. Because this is what I was born to do. The wind shifted. She felt it on her face. Calculated its speed, its direction. Factored it into equations that were already forming in her mind. Take the shot, Blackwell said quietly. And Ashford, thank you. Kira abandoned the Humvee at the base of the ridge. The climb would have to be on foot. She grabbed her rifle case, her pack, water, ammunition, first aid kit, nothing else. Speed mattered more than comfort. Speed mattered more than anything. The terrain was brutal. Loose rock that shifted under her boots, thorny scrub that tore at her hands and face, steep grades that made her lungs burn and her legs scream for rest she couldn't give them. She climbed anyway. One foot in front of the other, one handhold at a time. Forward, always forward. Behind her, the radio traffic continued. Men fighting, men dying, men holding on by their fingernails while she climbed toward a shot that might save them or might do nothing at all. Viper 4 is down. Repeat, Viper 4 is KIA. A name she didn't know. A face she'd probably seen but never memorized. Dead now. Gone. One of the 8 becoming 7. Ammunition at 30%. We can't hold this position much longer. Kira climbed faster. Her hands found a ridge of rock. She pulled herself up. The rock crumbled. For one terrible moment, she was falling backward, fingers scrambling for purchase on stone that betrayed her. Her left hand closed on a root, thorny, cutting into her palm. She held on anyway, used it to pull herself back onto stable ground. Blood ran down her wrist. She ignored it, kept climbing. 20 minutes into the ascent, she reached a false summit. A plateau that looked like the top, but wasn't. She could see the valley now, spread out below like a diorama of hell. Muzzle flashes everywhere, tracers cutting through darkness in lines of fire. And at the center, a cluster of rocks where the SEALs had made their last stand. They were surrounded on 3 sides. The 4th side was a cliff face. No escape, no reinforcement. Just 7 men against what looked like 40 or 50 fighters who had all the time in the world to finish what they'd started. Kira scanned the eastern ridge. There, the SAM position. She could see the launcher silhouetted against the stars. And beside it, a figure. The operator, the man keeping rescue at bay. The man who needed to die if anyone was going to live through this night. 1,400 meters, in darkness, with wind, with a target she could barely see. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, a lesson from when she was 10 years old, standing on a range in the rain while he watched her miss shot after shot. When everyone else sees impossible, you see opportunity. That's what makes you different, Kira. That's what makes you dangerous. She kept climbing, the final push to the ridge. Her lungs were fire. Her legs were rubber. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest. She gave them none. Garrett had maybe 30 minutes left, maybe less. Time was bleeding away as fast as his blood. The radio crackled again. Blackwell's voice. Viper 2 status. A pause. Then Brennan. He's fading, Commander. Pulse is thready. He's going in and out of consciousness. Stay with him. I'm trying, but sir, I don't think we have much time. Kira reached the ridge, found a position, stable ground, clear sightline. She began setting up her rifle with hands that should have been shaking, but weren't. Training. Thousands of hours of training had burned the shake out of her hands, had replaced human weakness with mechanical precision. The Mk-13 came together like pieces of a puzzle she'd solved 10,000 times. Stock, barrel, scope, each component clicking into place with the smooth certainty of something that had been designed for exactly this purpose. She settled into position, prone, left knee bent, right leg straight, the rifle nestled into her shoulder like it belonged there, like it had always belonged there. Through the scope, the SAM operator appeared. A man, middle-aged, beard. He was sitting beside the launcher, relaxed, confident. Why wouldn't he be? He was 1,300 meters away from the nearest threat. Nobody could touch him from that distance. Nobody could threaten him. He was invincible. He was wrong. Kira began her calculations. Wind speed, wind direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, the curve of the Earth beneath her, the rotation of the planet around her. 1,000 variables that would determine whether a piece of copper-jacketed lead traveled along the arc she needed or deviated by the inches that meant life or death. 1,400 meters, 2 seconds of flight time, 30 feet of drop, 10 feet of wind drift. A target the size of a dinner plate at a distance where most shooters couldn't even see what they were aiming at. One shot. Everything depended on one shot. Her finger rested on the trigger guard. Her breathing slowed. 50 beats per minute. 40. 30. The trained response of a body that had learned to function at the edge of human capability. She thought about the boy in Afghanistan, the 12-year-old whose death had followed her for 3 years. The face she saw every time she closed her eyes. The reason she'd left the military. The reason she thought she could never fire a weapon at another human being again. But this wasn't murder. This was protection. This was saving lives by taking one. This was the choice snipers made every time they looked through a scope. The math was simple. 1 death to save 7. 1 shot to give 8 families their fathers back. The boy would understand. She hoped he would understand. The wind shifted, a gust from the northeast. She adjusted her aim. 2 degrees. 3. The crosshairs settled on a point in space where mathematics said the target would be when the bullet arrived. She exhaled halfway, held it. The world narrowed to a single point of focus. The operator. 1,300 meters away, completely unaware that death was traveling toward him at 2,800 feet per second. Kira squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The sound rolled across the mountains like thunder announcing judgment. The scope showed the same position. The operator still sitting, still alive, still breathing. 1 second. Her scope didn't waver, didn't move. Discipline. Trust the math. Trust the training. Trust that physics worked the same in combat as it did on the range. 2 seconds. The operator jerked, slumped forward, didn't move again. 1,400 meters, in darkness, with wind, with a target that never knew what killed him. 1 shot, 1 kill. The impossible made real through training and will, and the steady hands of a woman everyone had told to stay home. Sinclair's voice exploded through the radio. "Sam is down. Sam is down. Air assets, you are cleared for approach. Repeat, cleared for approach." In the valley below, she could hear the change. The sound of helicopter rotors in the distance, growing louder, coming fast. Salvation arriving at 150 miles per hour. But Kira was already moving. Her muzzle flash had given her away. She could hear shouts in the valley, enemy fighters pointing toward her position, redirecting. They were coming. She broke down the rifle in seconds, packed it, grabbed her gear, began moving along the ridge, staying low, using terrain for cover. Behind her, the first shots rang out, rounds cracking against rock where she'd been seconds before. "Ashford, we're tracking multiple hostiles converging on your last position." Sinclair's voice was tight with fear. "You need to move. Already moving. Extraction birds are 5 minutes out. Can you reach the valley?" 5 minutes. She needed to cross a kilometer of hostile terrain, evade search teams that were actively hunting her, and reach an extraction point that was currently under enemy control. The math wasn't good. "I'll manage," she said. She ran. The ridge was narrow, forcing her into channels of rock that limited her options. She could hear voices behind her, getting closer. They were fast. They knew this terrain better than she did. They had numbers. They had time. She had training. Kira rounded a boulder and came face to face with an enemy fighter. He was young, 18, maybe 19, eyes wide with surprise in the moonlight. For a heartbeat, they both froze. Just two young people who'd been thrown into a war neither of them had started. Two lives that had intersected at this exact moment in time and space. Then his hand moved toward his weapon. Kira was faster. Years of close combat training took over. Muscle memory older than conscious thought. She deflected his rifle with her left hand, drove her right palm into his nose, felt cartilage crunch under the impact. Before he could recover, she swept his legs, dropped him to the ground, applied a chokehold her father had taught her when she was 12 years old. He struggled, clawed at her arms. His movements grew weaker, weaker, unconscious but not dead. She could have killed him, should have killed him by every tactical consideration, but she didn't. She released the hold, checked his pulse. Strong, steady. He'd wake up in a few minutes with a headache and a story. She'd spared his life because she could afford to, because killing wasn't the point. Surviving was. Getting home was. Making sure 7 men saw their families again was. Kira kept running. The valley floor was chaos. Helicopters approaching from the west, their rotors a thunderous heartbeat of hope against the darkness. The enemy fighters were caught between defending against the SEALs and responding to the incoming air support. "Viper team, extraction birds are 30 seconds out." Sinclair's voice. Steady now. Professional. "Move to rally point Alpha." Blackwell responded through labored breathing. "Moving now. Garrett's being carried. Hayes is mobile but wounded. We need covering fire." "Air support is engaging now." The helicopters opened up, door-mounted machine guns pouring fire into enemy positions. Tracers reaching down from the sky like the fingers of an angry god. The enemy scattered, dove for cover, returned fire, but without coordination. Without the careful planning that had made the ambush so deadly. Kira reached the edge of the ridge, 300 meters of steep descent between her and the valley floor. Beyond that, a clearing where the helicopters would land. She could see the SEALs now, figures moving through darkness, some supporting others, all of them heading for the clearing, all of them focused on reaching salvation. She could also see the problem. A group of enemy fighters had positioned themselves between the SEALs and the landing zone, dug in behind rocks, waiting. When the team tried to cross that final stretch, they'd be cut down. The helicopter gunners couldn't see them. The angle was wrong. The rocks blocked the view from above. But Kira could see them. 4 shooters, concealed position, perfect ambush point. She unslung her rifle, set up on the ridge, 400 meters to the enemy position. Not ideal, but manageable. She keyed her radio. Viper 6, you have hostiles dug in between you and extraction. 4 shooters in concealed position, bearing 035 from your current location. Blackwell's response was immediate. Can you deal with them? Already on it. She fired. The first fighter dropped before he knew what hit him. She worked the bolt, relocated, fired again. The second fighter fell. The remaining 2 realized what was happening. One of them turned, trying to identify her position, trying to bring his weapon to bear. She put a round through his chest before his rifle cleared the rock. The fourth fighter ran. Smart, survival instincts kicking in. She let him go. He wasn't a threat anymore. The path was clear. Path is clear, she transmitted. Move now. The SEALs surged forward, Brennan half carrying Garrett, Blackwell supporting Hayes, the others covering their movement with what little ammunition they had left. They moved like men who could see light at the end of a very dark tunnel, like men who'd given up hope and found it again. The helicopters touched down in the clearing, door gunners laying suppressive fire in all directions, covering, protecting, making sure their brothers made it home. The team piled in, wounded first. Garrett going aboard unconscious but breathing. Hayes gritting his teeth against pain. Then the others, one by one, loading onto salvation. Ashford, where are you? Blackwell's voice was urgent. Get to the extraction point. Kira was already moving, sliding down the ridge, using controlled falls to cover distance faster than running would allow. She could see the helicopter. 400 meters, 300, the rotors spinning, ready to lift off, ready to take her brothers home. Rounds cracked past her. The enemy had regrouped. They could see her now, exposed on the slope, running toward the helicopters. They were determined to make her pay for every life she'd taken tonight. 200 meters, her legs burned, her lungs screamed. A round tugged at her sleeve, drew a line of fire across her left arm. The pain was distant, irrelevant, forward. Only forward mattered. 100 meters. The helicopter's door gunner saw her, shifted fire to cover her approach. Tracers reached out, forcing the enemy to take cover, giving her the seconds she needed. 50 meters. The helicopter was lifting, beginning to climb, gaining altitude. But the crew chief was reaching for her, hand extended, refusing to leave without her. Kira sprinted with everything she had left, every ounce of strength, every bit of will, every reason she had to live. She jumped, launched herself toward the helicopter, toward the hand reaching for her, toward salvation or death, she didn't know which. The crew chief's hand caught her wrist. For a moment she hung suspended, legs dangling over darkness, over the valley floor that wanted to pull her down and keep her forever. Then he pulled. Other hands grabbed her jacket, her belt, her gear. They hauled her inside like fishermen pulling in a catch they thought was lost. She collapsed on the deck plates, gasping for air she couldn't seem to find. Her vision grayed at the edges. Her hands shook with adrenaline and exhaustion, in the aftermath of choices that had been measured in fractions of seconds. The helicopter climbed, tilted, accelerated away from the valley, away from the death they'd left behind, away from the trap that had killed one man and almost killed 7 more. They were alive, all of them, because a woman everyone had dismissed had refused to stay home, had refused to accept that impossible meant impossible, had climbed a mountain in darkness and made a shot that would become legend. Garrett was unconscious, medics already working on his leg, trying to replace the blood he'd lost, trying to keep his heart beating long enough to reach a hospital. Brennan sat beside him, holding the senior chief's hand, his face streaked with tears he didn't bother to hide. Hayes was being bandaged, shoulder wound, painful but not life-threatening. He'd keep the arm, keep his career, keep the ability to hold his children when he got home. The others looked like men who'd seen death and barely escaped, shell-shocked, traumatized, alive. Blackwell moved to where Kira lay on the floor. His face was streaked with sweat and blood from a wound she hadn't noticed before. A cut above his left eye, deep enough to need stitches, not deep enough to matter. He stared at her for a long moment, trying to find words for something that had no words. "That shot," he said finally, 1,400 meters, at night, with wind. That's the most impressive thing I've ever seen in 20 years of combat operations." Kira couldn't speak, could barely breathe. She managed to lift her hand, reached into her shirt, pulled out her dog tags. Blackwell took them, read them. His face changed. Ashford, Kira R., daughter of Admiral James Ashford, Commander, Naval Special Warfare Command. The other operators who were conscious went still. Admiral Ashford, the legend, the man who'd written the book on special operations, the man who'd trained more elite warriors than anyone else in military history, and this was his daughter. "He trained you," Blackwell said quietly, "your whole life. He made you into this." Kira nodded weakly. "Since I was 5. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me?" Blackwell was silent. They both knew the answer. No, they wouldn't have believed her, couldn't have believed her. The idea that a 28-year-old woman could be one of the most dangerous snipers in the world didn't fit into the boxes they'd built in their minds. "I tried to warn you," Kira said. Her voice was barely audible over the helicopter noise. "About the intelligence, about the trap. But you couldn't see past what you thought I was. A kid, a liability." Blackwell closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had changed. "I was wrong. We all were." He handed back her dog tags. "You saved 8 lives tonight, Ashford, including mine. I won't forget that." 7, Kira said. "Viper 4 is dead. I wasn't fast enough." "You were fast enough for the rest of us." Blackwell stood, extended his hand. "Welcome to the team, Captain. Really, truly, welcome." She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Her legs nearly buckled. Brennan was there, catching her, supporting her weight. "Easy. You just climbed a mountain and made an impossible shot. You're allowed to be tired." The helicopter flew on through the darkness, carrying its cargo of survivors toward the distant lights of civilization, toward hospitals and debriefings, and the long process of putting broken pieces back together. But Kira wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about what she'd heard on the radio during the ambush. The way the enemy had known exactly where to find them. The way the trap had been perfectly constructed. Someone had betrayed them. Someone with access to classified intelligence. Someone who had almost gotten 8 men killed tonight. And Kira intended to find out who. The helicopter touched down at Fort Bragg at 12 in the morning. Medical teams rushed the aircraft before the rotors stopped spinning. Kira watched from the deck as they loaded Garrett onto a stretcher. His face was gray, his breathing shallow. He looked like a man who'd come within minutes of dying and wasn't quite sure he'd made it back to the land of the living. "Hang in there, Senior Chief," Brennan said, gripping Garrett's hand one final time before the medics pulled him away. "You're too mean to die." Garrett's eyes fluttered open. He looked around, disoriented, confused, until his gaze found Kira. Something passed between them. Recognition, gratitude, a wordless apology for every cruel thing he'd said, for every assumption he'd made, for every moment he'd looked at her and seen weakness instead of strength. Then they were running with him toward the surgical unit, and he was gone. Blackwell stood beside Kira as the chaos swirled around them. Wounded being triaged, reports being shouted, officers demanding explanations for what had gone so catastrophically wrong. "You need medical attention," Blackwell said, nodding at her arm. Blood had soaked through her sleeve, the wound still bleeding sluggishly. Later, Kira's eyes tracked the base personnel rushing back and forth. "We need to find out who did this. The intelligence failure, that's for the investigators." Not investigators. Kira turned to face him. Me? You're suggesting we have a traitor? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you. She lowered her voice. The enemy knew exactly where you'd be. They knew your approach routes. They knew your extraction options. They knew how many men you had and where you'd set up your defensive position. That level of detail doesn't come from lucky guessing. It comes from someone who had access to your operational planning. Blackwell's jaw tightened. That's a serious accusation. 8 men almost died tonight. 1 man did die. That's serious. Kira met his eyes. I need to see the intelligence chain of custody. Every person who touched that package from source to distribution. That information is classified. Commander, Kira's voice hardened. My father is Admiral James Ashford. I have clearance levels you don't even know exist. Either you help me find the traitor, or I go over your head so fast you'll feel the breeze. Blackwell stared at her. This wasn't the quiet woman who'd arrived 2 days ago. This was someone else entirely. Someone who'd been forged in fire and emerged as steel. Someone who'd proven she belonged in the room with the best warriors America produced. Someone who wasn't asking for permission anymore. Follow me, he said. Lieutenant Commander Sinclair was already in the intelligence office when they arrived. She looked up from her terminal, face pale with exhaustion and something darker. I've been going through the source data, she said without preamble. Ashford was right. The intelligence was constructed, fabricated. Someone planted it specifically for us to find. Who? Blackwell demanded. That's what I'm trying to determine. Sinclair pulled up a screen. The initial report came from a paid informant. Handler was a contractor named David Sterling. But when I checked Sterling's access logs, she paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. What? Sterling's credentials were used to upload the intelligence, but the access originated from a secure facility in Germany. Sterling hasn't left Afghanistan in 8 months. Someone spoofed his credentials, Kira said. Used them remotely to plant the false intelligence. That would require significant technical expertise, Sinclair said, and detailed knowledge of our security protocols. Who has that kind of access? Sinclair hesitated. Her eyes flickered to Blackwell, then back to Kira. A handful of people, all vetted, all trusted. Names, Kira said. I can't just names. Sinclair took a breath. Then she started typing. There are 4 people with the technical capability and access level required. 2 are currently deployed to other theaters, Iraq and Syria. 1 is on leave in the States, Connecticut. She paused. The 4th is here, on this base. Who? The name appeared on the screen. Kira read it twice to make sure she wasn't mistaken. Major Philip Vaughn, Intelligence Liaison. 15 years of service, decorated, trusted, clean record. The kind of man who'd been at Blackwell's wedding, who'd held his children, who'd served beside these men for years. Vaughn, Blackwell's voice was hollow. I've known him for 8 years. Then he's been lying to you for 8 years, Kira said. She was already moving toward the door. Where is he? Kira, wait, Sinclair stood. We need to do this properly. Chain of evidence, interrogation protocols. If Vaughn is really the traitor, we need to build a case that will hold up. And if he runs while we're building our case, he won't run. He doesn't know we're onto him. Kira stopped, turned. You're sure about that? Sinclair opened her mouth to respond. Then her terminal beeped. An alert. She looked at it and her face went white. What? Blackwell moved to her side. Vaughn just logged into the system. He's deleting files, access logs, communication records, everything. Sinclair's fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to stop what was already in motion. He knows. Somehow he knows. Kira was out the door before either of them could react. Vaughn's quarters were on the far side of the base, 3 buildings over, 200 meters if you ran the direct route. Kira covered the distance in under a minute, ignoring the pain in her arm, ignoring the exhaustion that threatened to pull her down. She'd been awake for over 24 hours. She'd climbed a mountain, taken impossible shots, survived an extraction that should have killed her. None of that mattered. A traitor was escaping. The man who'd sent her brothers into an ambush was running, and she would be damned if she let him get away. She reached Vaughn's building, found the door to his quarters standing open. Inside, a half-packed bag sat on the bed. Drawers pulled open, closet emptied. He was already gone. Kira keyed her radio. Vaughn has fled his quarters. Packed bag. Open door. He's running. Sinclair responded immediately. I'm tracking his access card. He's at the motor pool. He's taking a vehicle. The motor pool was 200 meters away, back the way Kira had come. She sprinted again, muscles screaming, lungs burning. She rounded the corner just in time to see a Humvee pulling out. Vaughn behind the wheel, his face visible in the security lights. Eyes wide, panicked, the look of a man who'd been caught and knew it. Their eyes met through the windshield. For a single instant, everything stopped. The traitor and the woman who'd survived his trap. The man who'd sold out his brothers and the sniper who'd saved them. Two lives intersecting at a moment that would define everything that came after. Then Vaughn floored the accelerator. Kira didn't think, didn't hesitate. She drew her sidearm and fired. Not at Vaughn, at the tires. One shot. Two. The front right tire exploded. The Humvee swerved, fishtailed, slammed into a concrete barrier with a sound like the end of the world. She was on him before he could recover. Yanked open the driver's door, grabbed Vaughn by his collar, threw him onto the ground with strength born of fury and righteousness and 3 years of training that had been waiting for this exact moment. Don't move. Her weapon was aimed at his face. Don't breathe without permission. Vaughn stared up at her. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead. His eyes were wild with fear and something else. Desperation. You don't understand. They made me do it. They have my family. Your family? Kira's voice was flat, cold. You sold out 8 men because of your family? My wife, my children. They said they'd kill them if I didn't cooperate. So you decided to kill us instead. I didn't have a choice. Kira crouched beside him, her weapon still trained on his face. There's always a choice, Major. You could have reported the threat. You could have asked for protection. You could have done literally anything except send good men to die. You don't know what it's like, Vaughn's voice cracked. Watching your children grow up, knowing someone could take them away at any moment, knowing that every day you don't cooperate might be the day they disappear. You're right. I don't know what that's like. Kira leaned closer. But I know what it's like to run toward a battle I wasn't supposed to be part of. I know what it's like to make impossible shots while men are dying around me. I know what it's like to fight for people who don't even want me there. She stood, weapon still aimed. You had everything. Trust, position, brothers who would have died for you. And you threw it all away because you were afraid. Military police arrived then, sirens and flashlights converging on the motor pool. Blackwell was with them. Sinclair, half a dozen armed personnel who surrounded Vaughn like he was a bomb that might detonate. Take him, Kira said, stepping back. They hauled Vaughn to his feet, cuffed him, read him his rights in voices that carried the weight of betrayal. As they dragged him away, he looked back at Kira one final time. Who are you? He asked. Who the hell are you? The girl you tried to get killed, she answered. The one who came back anyway. The debriefing took 3 hours. Kira sat in a hard chair in a windowless room, answering questions from intelligence officers and legal representatives and commanding officers she'd never met before. Men in suits who looked at her like she was a problem that needed to be categorized and filed away. Men in uniforms who couldn't quite reconcile the woman sitting in front of them with the legend that was already spreading through the base. Her arm had finally been bandaged. Someone had given her coffee she didn't taste. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that made the fluorescent lights feel like knives in her eyes. Major Vaughn had talked. Once he started, he couldn't stop. The whole sordid story came spilling out like poison from an infected wound. Gambling debts from 5 years ago, debts to people who didn't forgive and didn't forget. Threats that started small and escalated. Do this one thing, just this one small thing, then another, then another, until small compromises became outright treason, and there was no way back. He'd been feeding intelligence to a criminal network for 2 years, not just about this mission, about operations across 3 continents. How many soldiers had died because of his cowardice? How many missions had failed? How many families had received folded flags because one man had been too weak to stand up and say, no? They'd probably never know the full extent of the damage. Sinclair found Kira afterward, alone in the corridor outside the debriefing room. The intelligence officer looked like she'd aged a decade in the past 24 hours. Vaughn's been feeding them information for 2 years, she said without preamble. Tonight wasn't the first operation he compromised, just the biggest. How many others died because of him? Sinclair didn't answer. That was answer enough. Garrett's out of surgery, she added quietly. They saved his leg. He's going to make it. Kira closed her eyes. For a moment, she let herself feel the relief. The weight that had been pressing on her chest since the helicopter ride back eased slightly. Garrett would live, would walk again, would get to hold his brother's daughter and teach her to ride a bike, and see her graduate and walk her down the aisle someday when her father was deployed and couldn't be there himself. Thank you for telling me, Sinclair hesitated. What you did tonight, the shot, the climb, finding Vaughn. You're 28 years old. How is any of this possible? My father started training me when I was 5. Kira opened her eyes. After my mother died, he didn't know how to raise a daughter. All he knew was how to make warriors. So that's what he did. He made you into a weapon. He made me into someone who could protect people. Kira stood. There's a difference. She walked to the medical unit. Garrett was in a private room, machines beeping softly, 4 lines running into his arm. He looked smaller than he had on the range, more vulnerable, the kind of vulnerability that came when the armor of invincibility cracked, and a man remembered he was mortal after all. Brennan sat beside him, refusing to leave despite the nurses telling him that visiting hours were over and patients needed rest. He looked up when Kira entered. How is he? She asked from the doorway. They say he'll walk again. Might take months of rehab, but he'll walk. Brennan's voice was hoarse, raw. He woke up an hour ago, asked about you. What did he say? He wanted me to give you a message. Brennan paused. He said he was wrong about everything. He said you're not the kid he thought you were. Another pause. He said you're the best damn sniper he's ever seen. Kira didn't know how to respond to that. She stood in the doorway, looking at the man who'd mocked her, who'd tormented her, who'd tried to drive her away from the first moment she'd arrived. The man whose life she'd saved. Tell him we're even, she said finally. He doubted me. I proved him wrong. That's all there is to it. She turned to leave. Kira, Brennan's voice stopped her. For what it's worth, I believed in you. From the first time I watched you clean that rifle, I knew you were something special. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have mattered? Would any of them have listened? Kira considered the question. No, probably not. Then I figured I'd let you prove it yourself. Brennan managed a tired smile. And you did. 1,400 meters in the dark with wind. That's going to be a legend. You know that, right? They'll be telling that story for decades. I don't want to be a legend. Too late. You already are. The sun was rising when Kira finally made it outside. She'd been awake for 30 hours, had climbed a mountain, made impossible shots, survived an extraction, caught a traitor, saved 7 lives and failed to save 1. Viper 4, a man whose name she still didn't know, whose face she'd probably seen but never memorized. Dead because she hadn't been fast enough. Because 1,400 meters was a long way to shoot, and even the best snipers in the world couldn't save everyone. She sat on the steps of the operations center and watched the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Beautiful, indifferent. The same sun that rose over battlefields and hospitals and graveyards. The same sun that would rise tomorrow, whether she was here to see it or not. "You should be sleeping." Colonel Declan Rutherford's voice, deep, commanding. The voice of a man who'd spent 40 years telling people what to do and having them obey. He sat down beside her, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose body remembered injuries that had happened decades ago. 68 years old, silver-haired, eyes the color of winter ocean. He wore his dress uniform, every medal, every decoration, every symbol of a career that had shaped modern special operations and left scars on his soul that would never fully heal. "Can't sleep," Kira said. "Too much adrenaline still." "I know the feeling." Rutherford was quiet for a moment. "I called your father, told him what you did." Kira stiffened. "And?" "He said he's proud of you. He also said he's going to kill you himself for taking that kind of risk." The colonel almost smiled. "I told him you saved 8 lives. He said that sounds about right for his daughter." "That sounds like him." They sat in silence, watching the sun climb higher. Two warriors separated by 40 years and connected by the same understanding of what it meant to pull a trigger and live with the consequences. "I owe you an apology," Rutherford said finally. "Not just for doubting you, for not listening when you tried to warn us. Vaughn would have found another way. He'd been doing this for 2 years. He would have adapted, changed tactics, found a different opportunity. Maybe, but I still should have listened." "Yes," Kira said, "you should have." Rutherford flinched, but didn't argue. "I'm not going to pretend what I did was okay. I dismissed you because you were young, because you were female, because you didn't fit my idea of what a warrior looks like. But you also came back for me. At the extraction point, the helicopter was lifting off. You could have left me behind." "Leaving people behind isn't who I am." "No, it's not." Kira stood, extended her hand. "That's why I'm going to give you another chance. Because underneath all the bias and assumption, you're still a good man who made bad judgments." Rutherford stood as well, took her hand. "I won't make those judgments again. I'll hold you to that." The mission briefing happened at 1400 hours. Kira had managed 4 hours of sleep, a shower, food that tasted like cardboard but gave her body fuel it desperately needed. She walked into the operations center feeling almost human again. The atmosphere had changed. 8 operators turned to look at her, but the hostility was gone, replaced by something that looked like respect, like recognition, like acceptance into a brotherhood that didn't usually make room for sisters. Blackwell stood at the front of the room. "Intel has located Abdul Karim. Same target we were supposed to eliminate before the ambush. He's moved to a secondary compound, heavily fortified, better defended." He pulled up satellite imagery. "He knows we're coming." "Then why go?" one of the operators asked. "We already lost 1 man. Why risk more?" "Because Karim still has intelligence that could get American assets killed. Because letting him walk away sends a message that you can ambush a SEAL team and live to brag about it." Blackwell paused. "Because we finish what we start." He looked at Kira. "This time we do it right. Full team, air support confirmed, and Overwatch position." His finger moved to a ridge on the satellite image. "That's yours, Ashford." The room stirred. Overwatch was the senior sniper's role, Garrett's role when he was healthy, the position of ultimate trust, the person who watched over everyone else and kept them safe when they couldn't see the danger coming. "Sir," someone spoke up. Kira didn't recognize the voice. "No disrespect to Ashford, but she's 28. Senior Overwatch on a high-value target operation?" "Ashford made a 1,400-meter shot under combat conditions that saved this entire team," Blackwell responded. "She exposed a traitor who'd been feeding our operations to the enemy for 2 years. She has more combat experience in the last 72 hours than most operators get in their first deployment." He paused. Any other objections? Silence. Good. Ashford, you'll position here. He pointed to the ridge. Elevation advantage. Clear sight lines. Covered approach. You'll be our eyes and our insurance. The helicopters lifted off at 0400 hours. Kira sat in the lead aircraft, rifle case between her knees, watching the faces of the men around her. They were different now. The hostility was gone. The doubt was gone. In its place was something she'd never expected to see directed at her. Trust. Brennan caught her eye and nodded. Blackwell was reviewing tactical displays, but he glanced up long enough to give her a thumbs up. Even the operators who'd been most skeptical now looked at her like she was one of them. Finally, completely. The flight took 40 minutes. The terrain was different here, less mountainous, more desert. Rolling hills covered in scrub and rock that offered concealment but not much cover. Kira reached the ridge as the sky began to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming. The assault would begin with first light. The compound spread out below her, 1,200 meters away. She could see guards on the walls, vehicles in the courtyard, movement in the windows. She set up her rifle with practiced efficiency. The Mk-13 came together like an old friend returning after a long absence. "Ghost in position," she transmitted. "I have eyes on target compound, counting 12 hostiles visible, probably more inside." Blackwell responded immediately. "Copy, Ghost. We're beginning approach. Call out any threats you see." "Roger that." The team reached the outer perimeter. Breaching charges were placed. Timers set. Kira's finger rested on the trigger. A guard on the north wall had turned, looking in the wrong direction. Perfect. 30 seconds to breach, Blackwell reported. Kira's breathing slowed, the familiar calm settling over her like a blanket. 20 seconds. The guard turned again. His eyes swept across the valley, stopped. He'd seen something. "Contact!" Kira's voice was sharp. "North wall guard is alerting. Taking the shot." She fired. The guard dropped before he could raise an alarm. "Threat neutralized. Continue breach." The charges detonated. The team poured through the walls. Gunfire erupted from every direction, but this time it was controlled, expected. The SEALs had prepared for resistance. Kira worked her rifle with mechanical precision. A fighter emerging from a doorway. Down. Another trying to flank the team from the west. Down. A third raising an RPG toward the assault force. Down before his finger found the trigger. Multiple hostiles exiting the main building. Brennan's voice was tight with adrenaline. 5 targets, moving to defensive positions. "I see them." Kira shifted her aim. 5 fighters running, 5 shots fired, 5 bodies falling. Threats eliminated. "Jesus," someone breathed over the radio. "She's not missing." "Focus on your sector," Blackwell snapped. "Ghost, any sign of the primary target?" "Negative, he's not visible from my position." "Copy, we're entering the main building." Kira watched helplessly as the team disappeared inside. She could hear the gunfire through the radio. Shouts, explosions, the chaos of close-quarters combat. But she couldn't help them in there. Couldn't protect them when walls blocked her view. "Contact in the central room," Brennan shouted. "Grenade! Get down!" The explosion was loud enough to hear without the radio. Kira's heart hammered. Who'd been hit? How bad? Were they still in the fight? "Man down! Hayes is hit. Shoulder wound, but he's mobile." Not fatal. Not immediately. But Hayes had already been wounded in the first mission. How much could one man take? "Ghost, target is exiting through the rear." Blackwell's voice cut through the chaos. 3 hostiles, moving toward a vehicle. "I need eyes." Kira swung her scope to the compound's rear. There, 3 figures emerging, running. One of them was taller than the others, older, moving with the authority of command. Abdul Karim, the man who'd killed American soldiers, who'd sold weapons to terrorists, who'd orchestrated attacks that had left families shattered and children fatherless. Running like the coward he was. "Target confirmed. Rear exit. 3 hostiles moving to vehicle. I have the shot. Take it. Kira aimed. The first bodyguard. 800 meters. Moving fast. She led the target, calculated his speed, his trajectory. Fired. He dropped. She worked the bolt, chambered another round. The second bodyguard fell before he knew his companion was dead. Kareem threw himself behind the vehicle. Smart. Using cover. She couldn't see him now, couldn't get a clean shot through steel and engine block. Target is using vehicle for cover. I don't have an angle. Can you disable the vehicle? Already on it. She put a round through the engine block, then another through the front tire. The vehicle wasn't going anywhere, but Kareem was still hidden, still alive, still breathing when he deserved to be bleeding out in the dirt for everything he'd done. Viper 6, I need you to flush him out. I can't see him behind that vehicle. We're pinned in the basement, taking fire from multiple directions. We can't reach you. Kira made a decision. A crazy, reckless, completely unreasonable decision. The kind of decision that would probably get her killed, but might save the mission. Might stop a monster from escaping to kill again. I'm repositioning, she transmitted. Ghost, negative. Hold your position. She was already moving, grabbing her rifle, sliding down the ridge, running toward the compound. 800 meters of open ground between her and the target. 800 meters where she'd be exposed, vulnerable, an easy target for anyone who saw her. Ghost, what the hell are you doing? My job, Commander. She ran. Bullets cracked around her. Someone had spotted her, was trying to bring her down. She didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept moving, closing the distance. 600 meters, 400, 200. She dropped behind a wall, breathing hard. From here, she could see around the vehicle. Kareem was crouched behind the rear wheel, a pistol in his hand, eyes wild with fear. He'd built an empire on violence and intimidation, had made others afraid while he sat safe in compounds, protected by walls and guards and layers of security. Now he was the one who was afraid. Now he was the one who was trapped. Now he understood what it felt like to be hunted by someone better than you. He saw her. Their eyes met across 50 meters of dusty courtyard. Two people whose lives had intersected at this exact moment in time and space. The terrorist and the sniper. The predator and the protector. The man who destroyed and the woman who saved. Kira raised her rifle. Kareem raised his pistol. For one frozen instant, they both aimed, both prepared to fire, both knowing that only one of them would walk away. She was faster. Years of training, thousands of hours of practice, muscle memory faster than conscious thought. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The sound was sharp, final, absolute. Kareem jerked backward. The pistol fell from his fingers. He slumped against the vehicle and didn't move. Blood spread across his chest in a dark stain that said everything about how this story ended. Target down, Kira reported. Her voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Abdul Kareem is eliminated. Silence on the radio. Then Blackwell's voice, filled with something that sounded like awe. Copy, Ghost. Target confirmed down. All units prepare for extraction. The helicopters arrived 12 minutes later. The team emerged from the compound, some walking, others being carried. Hayes had taken another round, this one in the leg, but he was alive, conscious, complaining about the medics who were trying to treat him while he was still trying to shoot back. Everyone was coming home. Blackwell found Kira sitting against the wall where she'd taken the final shot. Her hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and the weight of choices that could never be unmade. You disobeyed a direct order, he said. Yes, sir. You left your overwatch position without authorization. Yes, sir. You crossed 800 meters of open ground under enemy fire. Yes, sir. Blackwell crouched beside her. You also saved this entire operation. Kareem was 30 seconds from escaping. If he'd gotten away, we'd have lost him for months, maybe years. He paused. Why did you do it? Kira looked at him. Because I saw my team in trouble. I saw a target escaping, and I decided that following orders mattered less than completing the mission and protecting my people. Your people, Blackwell smiled. When did we become your people? When you stopped seeing me as a liability and started seeing me as a warrior. He stood, extended his hand, pulled her to her feet. You know what I'm going to do now? Court-martial me? Recommend you for a Bronze Star. He met her eyes. Welcome to the team, Ashford. Officially, permanently. You're one of us now. The flight back to Fort Bragg was quiet. Operators dozed. Medics tended wounds. Hayes complained half-heartedly about being shot twice in 3 days. Someone made a joke about him being a bullet magnet. Someone else suggested he invest in better body armor. The laughter was tired, but genuine. The sound of men who'd survived and could afford to laugh about it. Kira sat with her rifle across her lap, watching the desert give way to mountains, give way to forests. Thinking about choices, about the weight of each death carried its own gravity, its own price. She'd learned to live with one, she'd learned to live with the other. Brennan dropped into the seat beside her. Hell of a shot back there. Which one? All of them, but especially running across 800 meters to get the kill. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the craziest. Can it be both? He laughed. Yeah, I guess it can. He was quiet for a moment. My daughter. I haven't told you about her. You don't have to. I want to. Brennan looked out the window. She died 5 years ago. Cancer. She was 7 years old. Kira felt her throat tighten. I'm sorry. After she died, I volunteered for every dangerous mission I could find. I wanted someone to put a bullet in me, so I didn't have to feel the pain anymore. He paused. But then I started working with these guys. They became my family. Gave me a reason to keep going. Why are you telling me this? Because when I saw you that first night, cleaning your rifle with that look in your eyes, I recognized it. The look of someone carrying something they don't know how to put down. He turned to face her. You're not just here because your father trained you. You're here because you're running from something. Kira was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. My mother, she died when I was 7. Cancer. Took 2 years from diagnosis to the end. Her voice was barely audible over the helicopter noise. I watched her disappear, a piece at a time. I couldn't do anything, couldn't stop it, couldn't fix it, couldn't even make her comfortable at the end. So your father taught you to shoot. He taught me to control what I could control. Distance, wind, elevation, the microscopic variables that determine where a bullet goes. She looked at her hands. When I'm behind a rifle, everything makes sense, cause and effect, action and consequence. I can predict what will happen and make it happen exactly the way I want. And tonight I was in control. Men were dying and I could do something about it. A tear escaped before she could stop it. Is that terrible? That I felt more alive in combat than I have since I was 7? Brennan put his arm around her shoulders. It's not terrible. It's human. We all find our peace in different places. Some people find it in churches. Some find it in families. He paused. Some of us find it in the space between heartbeats, waiting for the recoil. Kira leaned against him. For a moment, she wasn't Captain Ashford, wasn't the sniper who'd made impossible shots, wasn't the warrior who'd proven everyone wrong. She was just a girl who missed her mother and didn't know how to live in a world without her. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me when no one else did. That's what family does. And you're family now, whether you like it or not. The helicopter touched down at Fort Bragg as the sun was setting. 7 men walked off. 1 had been carried off in the desert. Viper 4, still unnamed in her mind, still dead because she hadn't been fast enough the first time. But 7 had lived. 7 families would get phone calls that started with relief instead of grief. 7 children would see their fathers again. 7 wives would hold their husbands and know that someone had kept them safe when they couldn't keep themselves safe. That had to be enough. It had to be. Colonel Rutherford was waiting on the tarmac. He watched the team disembark with eyes that had seen too many helicopters return with fewer men than they'd left with. When Kira stepped onto the concrete, he walked over, pulled her into a hug that surprised them both. "You did good, kid," he said quietly. "Your father would be proud." The next morning, Kira stood in the operations center, the same room where she'd been dismissed 3 days ago, where Garrett had mocked her, where no one had believed a word she said. The room was packed now. Every operator from the team, Sinclair, medical staff, officers she recognized and some she didn't. And at the center, wearing his dress uniform with 4 stars on the collar, stood her father, Admiral James Ashford, 62 years old, silver-haired, eyes the same pale blue as his daughter's. He looked at her with an expression she'd seen before but never quite understood until this moment. Pride, pure, unfiltered, absolute. "Captain Kira Ashford," he said formally, "front and center." She walked forward, stood at attention in front of the man who'd raised her, trained her, made her into what she was. "It has come to my attention," he continued, "that you performed actions in the previous 72 hours that warrant recognition. You identified a security threat that had compromised multiple operations. You conducted a solo infiltration into hostile territory under extreme conditions. You executed precision shots at ranges exceeding normal engagement parameters. You pursued and apprehended a hostile operative attempting to flee. And you eliminated a high-value target who'd evaded capture for 3 years." He paused, pulled out a small box. "For these actions, you are hereby awarded the Bronze Star with Valor device. You are also being recommended for assignment to Naval Special Warfare Development Group upon completion of your current obligations. DevGru, SEAL Team 6, the most elite tier of special operations in the world. The unit that hunted terrorists and rescued hostages and did things that would never appear in any official record." Her father pinned the medal to her uniform. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He hugged her, right there in front of 40 witnesses. The legendary Admiral James Ashford, who never showed emotion, pulling his daughter close and whispering in her ear, "Your mother would be so proud. I wish she could see what you've become." Kira held him tight. "She can. I know she can." The room erupted in applause. Operators crowding forward, hands reaching out to shake hers. Congratulations mixing with jokes about her making them all look bad. Garrett was there, still on crutches, pulling her into a one-armed hug that lifted her off the ground despite his injuries. "Best damn sniper I ever saw," he said. "I meant every word." Brennan was crying openly. Sinclair was smiling. Even Blackwell, who'd been so hostile 3 days ago, looked at her like she'd always belonged. She was home, finally, truly, not because of her father's name or her mother's legacy, because she'd earned it, because she'd proven herself in fire and blood and impossible shots in the darkness. That evening, Kira sat alone on the roof of the operations building, watching the sunset, thinking about everything that had changed in 3 days, everything she'd lost and found and proven and become. She wore her mother's Olympic medal around her neck, the silver medal from 1984, the one her father had given her after the first mission. The physical proof that her talent came from somewhere, that it was a gift passed down from a woman who'd loved shooting and loved her daughter and had left pieces of herself in both. She felt the weight of the Bronze Star on her chest, the recognition that she'd earned through actions that had saved lives and taken lives, and changed everything. She'd been the girl they wanted to send away, the liability, the technical specialist who didn't belong. Now she was Ghost, the sniper who never missed, the warrior who'd saved 8 lives and changed everything. And this was just the beginning. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Beautiful, perfect, the same sun that would rise tomorrow and the day after in all the days to come, days where she would train new snipers, where she would pass on the lessons her father had taught her, where she would honor her mother's memory by protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Days where she would be exactly who she was meant to be, a protector, a warrior, a woman who'd proven that impossible was just another word for difficult. Kira Ashford watched the sun set over Fort Bragg and smiled. This was just the beginning.